I'm going to pick up on this whole idea of integration, utilizing your CRM, what that process is going into the new account opening system, which is UAO, and then going into Laser App, okay? So you start in your CRM, and you'll start here on your red tail page. You click on your contact, you're going to have a screen that pops up. It says, which contacts do you want? You'll pick on a contact. For instance, we picked on Jonathan Adams here. So whenever you see in red tail or in the system, you're going to see, sorry Joe, I had to move over here, but you have that button there. Universally, that's integration. And so that is your integration button. So when you want to go from your CRM into UAO, so take the information in your client card, shove it over into the system, you're going to hit integration. And then you're going to have a screen that pops up. And that screen is going to show you all of the software systems that you have integration with your CRM. So you may have a financial planning software that you integrate, right? So that maybe if you want to do a financial plan, you throw integration over. In this instance, we're going to show the integration into Wealthscape. And then you click on that button, another button pops up. It says, hit your new account. You hit new account. It'll then shoot you over into the UAO system, okay? We all following along here? Yes? Okay. So Jen is going to go much more in depth on the process of filling out UAO. I am not here. So once you get into the UAO system and you fill out your information, you do your registration and all this other thing, you're going to come to a screen like this. You'll see that this information was pre-populated. Why? Because it pushed over from your CRM. Anything not in your CRM won't show up here. What you do is though, once you get all your information, you fill out your UAO new account setup form in here, and you want to get to Laser App, push it over. There's going to be a thing down here. It says Documents. You're going to click on that link, right? It's going to bring you to a page where it shows your hosted AIC forms that have to be that were filled out on your UAO. But more importantly, down here, you're going to see a Laser App section. So you click on the link there, it says Laser App Anywhere. So I'm skipping some pages. Not all the pages are up there. This is literally, this guide is step by step. So when you go to set it up, you'll know. It tells you step by step every screen. I'm just trying to hit the main points to showing you the ease of pushing information from one system to the next. So you'll click on your Laser App button there. Oh. And it'll tell you that it's launching over to a third-party site. You click OK, and now you're in Laser App. So those of you that are familiar with Laser App maybe have seen a screen like this. But you go in here, and this is where you're going to select your American funds paperwork. Maybe you're doing something else with BlackRock, and you're going to come in here, going to select the forms. So once you've gone through and you've selected your forms and you've filled out your forms, right, you then see a tab up here. It says Post Back to NFS. So that basically means you're shooting the information back into UAO. So why would you want to do that? We talked about that. When you shoot it back in, now all of your forms show up on one page, right? So your UAO National Financial Account form is there. Any other AIC form is going to show up there. And then you'll see the application that you just completed in Laser App. If you remember, on a previous screen, there was no hyperlink there, right? Now there's a hyperlink there. And what you can do is you can print that all off into one document. That one document is going to have a barcode associated with every page. All right? And that's going to help with tracking purposes in the back office. So the process is very easy and very simple to go through from UAO to, or from CRM to UAO into Laser App, okay? Now, when you come on board, hey Jen, just real quick, when they come on board, that link is not all going to be set up. They're going to have to set that up.
We will have very detailed instructions on how to link your Wealthscapes and Laser App ID. You have to do it yourself the first time. We'll have very detailed instructions.
So basically, when you come on board and you log in, you're going to have detailed instructions on how to set up that link from your CRM into UAO, and then you'll have to set up a Laser App link as well. Okay. What these instructions here is once that's set up, it shows you the process of how you get from point A to point D to do business, okay, in an efficient manner. So very simple. I don't want to get into the UAO process very much because we have a whole segment on that. Any questions on that integration and how that works. Are you guys used to having integration like that and being able to do things? No? So, like I said earlier, CRM with Redtail, there's a robust training modules out there. Laser app, there's just not much there because it's a hosting site, it's a portal for the vendor form, so it's not very complicated. But that's the system, and that's how you go through integration with there. What we're going to do now is, as I said, Jen's going to come up here, and she's actually going to go through the actual detailed process, and I'm going to go back there and type in the information for her.
All right, so first this is just kind of an overview of what these tools are. And at the bottom of your agenda today, we have some acronyms and what they actually mean, because you'll see a lot of UAO, BPM, SMS, NFS. I mean, there's a lot of acronyms in our world. So here, just talking about 3 of the tools that you're going to have access to. UAO is Unified Account Opening, and that is the account opening tool that we've been talking about. And it sits on the Wealthscape platform, which you will have access to. SMS, that is our secure message system. That is something that we have in-house at AIC, a way for you to electronically upload paperwork to us instead of having to fax it or mail it. And it works for all kinds of business. It works for your annuities, direct business, mutual funds, brokerage, anything you're not using through e-signature. It works for all of that. And it's on a system called Producer Workbench, which if you already are on an emeritus contract, you already have access to Producer Workbench, and you might have even seen this before. The rest of you, as you end up getting contracted or as we move towards your transition, you will have access to Producer Workbench, which is just a tool across all of emeritus, not just AIC. But that is where our paperwork upload system is, and it's extremely easy. One of the handouts you're getting right now is a 1-page on SMS that's got like 5 steps and done. So it's super easy to use. And then BPM, that stands for Business Process Manager. That is our imaging and workflow tool. Again, it's through National Financial, and it's on the Wealthscape platform. And you will have access to that as well in Wealthscape, and that's where you can actually see the paperwork that you've sent us. Instead of for e-signature, you don't have to print it because it's in BPM. But it's also the tool in our back office. When you send us paperwork, it goes through workflow in our processing team. So it's a double tool. It's not only just an imaging storage system that you can use to see, but it's also what our back office uses to process things. So Dave, if you could switch us over to Wealthscape, we're now going to take a look at UAO. So as we showed you before, this is Wealthscape. UAO is under the Service tab, and it is over on the side where it just said Open New Account. And it opens in a separate window so that you're not logged out of Wealthscape behind the scenes or anything like that. You can still be in both places at the same time. Just remember to have your pop-up blocker off. And one good tip is whenever you upgrade your browser, you get a new computer, it automatically defaults to your pop-up blocker being on. We get this question a lot. I clicked on it, nothing's happening. It says I'm not authorized. Well, your pop-up blocker's on. So just in general, for working with Wealthscape, you want to make sure your pop-up blocker is off, or at least off for this site, because a lot of the tools in Wealthscape open in separate windows, so you're not logged out of Wealthscape, but they won't work if your pop-up blocker is on. So when you come into UAO, whether you just clicked on it from Wealthscape or you integrated from Redtail, this is where you're going to land. This is what they call the app header page. Does this have a light on it? Yeah. The app header page is what they call this. But this is just kind of your starting point. And from here, you're primed to open a new account. But there's also some tabs up at the top for some different things that you can do in here. There's a Help tab, which actually, if you click on that, it actually has recorded trainings from National Financial specifically on various aspects of UAO. One of those being integration with your CRM, one of those being e-signature. They're short, they're very well done. They're created by National Financial, so they are using the base UAO system, which we have actually customized. So we've customized it to try to make it a little easier. We've taken off fields that don't apply. We've taken options out of boxes that don't apply. So these trainings done by National Financial are going to be on the way they programmed the system. So they're very helpful, but you might see a few things in there that you won't see in our environment. which is why we do our own training on it. But they're a good resource if you get stuck or just need additional help or anything like that. So going back to UAO, you're going to have to close that and reopen it under service. There we go. There's also, there is a reports tab in here, which we don't talk about much because it's not very useful. It's just reports on what you have sitting out in the system. So the way UAO works is it's based on a 30-day window. It's not meant to be a client data system or a data warehouse. It is meant to be an account opening portal. So when you start an application in here, it starts a 30-day window, and it saves it for 30 days. And anytime you come and add something to it or make it a change, it starts another 30 days, so it knows you are working on it. Once you've fully submitted something through here, it starts a final 30 days, and then it drops off because it's not meant to stay out here forever. So the reports actually only show you everything you currently have sitting out there, which you can actually see just by clicking on the search tab instead. So we don't talk a lot about the reports tab there because it's just not very useful. Clicking on search will show you everything that you have out in the system right now. We have a few test accounts out here that we've been playing with. And you can see they've got different statuses, like they're saved. These aren't going through e-signature. It's got your rep code, client name, registration type, the channel, which I'll explain in a minute, the difference between those. But from here, you can, on the action box, you can select one of these, which means you're going to reopen it and start working on it again, add more things to it. It starts another 30-day window. So that's how you can start something and save it and come back later and work on it. So you don't have to do it all in one sitting. You can copy it, and copy is a great function. So let's say you've got a husband and wife and they're doing a joint account and they're each doing IRAs. You can start with a joint account and then use the copy feature and copy each of their information into the IRAs instead of having to type it 3 separate times. So copy is definitely very useful. And then you've got delete. Delete only works if your account is saved, not approved. Once you've finalized the account, you can't delete it because it's a real account. But if you are working on one and you started with a traditional and then you met with them again and decided, no, it's going to be a Roth, you could delete the traditional and start the Roth instead, or copy the traditional into the Roth and then delete the traditional. It just gives you some different options out here. So let's start a new account. So doing new account, the first thing it's going to ask you is the channel. And channel just means what type of account is this. And your 3 options in there are National Financial Services, which means brokerage, Mutual Fund Direct, and Variable Annuity. Currently the advisory, so Vantage, SEI, CLS, they are not in UAO, and you're not required to use UAO for that right now. We still do those in paper right now. We're actually looking at possibly using some of the online tools SEI and other people have to let you open it directly there and then they send us information. We're kind of working through some of that for DOL. But right now, any direct advisory business that you do is still just you fill out the paper, you send us copies, and we process it that way. You don't have to use this process. But you will use this process for any brokerage accounts, direct mutual funds, and annuities. So we're going to show the first example of brokerage today, since we've talked about brokerage, and since when DOL takes effect, we'll have to be using brokerage for qualified accounts. So the next thing it asks is, what registration is this? 90%, probably 95% of the registrations you will ever use are out here. There are a few that aren't, and we have a handout that Dave gave you just showing a few that aren't. For brokerage, it's registrations that some of these I have never even seen before come through. So it's very random, like an unincorporated association and investment club, which they don't even have a lot of those anymore, things like that. And National Financial is actually working on getting those in here. So by the end of the year, there'll be even fewer things that you can't use on here. But the bulk of your registrations that you're going to use are out here. So for example, we'll pick an IRA. And now you can see it's opened up a couple of different boxes. So it knows based on what you're selecting, what other fields you're going to have to fill in. So this next box is branch prefix. And so this is just proprietary to the brokerage world. A prefix is the first 3 characters of the account number. And you'll see if you've ever done brokerage business before, or if you've transferred accounts from Fidelity or Pershing, you'll see they use a format of 3 characters, a dash, and then 6 digits for account numbers. Those first 3 characters are called a prefix. And the way we use that is we have a different prefix for each kind of product that we do. We have a commission-based prefix, and then those others are different managed account products, which we use at AIC that you're not using right now. You are going to have your own capital choice prefix out here because we're keeping your business separate for reporting purposes and supervision. So it's not programmed into UAO yet. I'm trying to reserve some letters that have CCFG, something like that in there, so it'll kind of ring a bell, and then we'll put wording after it that says capital choice. So when you come out here, you will use your own prefix for that says capital choice. And this is only for brokerage accounts, but that basically, you're selecting it here so that when you're done and it assigns account number, it assigns it starting CCF or whatever that prefix is going to be. So we're going to just pick AK7 for example purposes. The next 2 fields are your rep code. And I know your rep codes are primarily all numbers. National Financial for brokerage accounts, they only use the last 3 characters of your rep code for a brokerage account. And we have a list of all of your rep codes. Our registration department's been going through them to make sure they don't conflict with any of our other rep codes that we have in the system. There's just a handful of people who are going to have a slightly different rep code going forward. All of that will be communicated ahead of time if anything's changing for you. Otherwise, this is the last 3 characters of your rep code. And I know there are a few people at Capital Choice that don't even have 3 characters in your rep code, and we'll just add zeros in front of it for you. And again, all of that will be communicated ahead of time of what you personally will need to use in here. But you enter your rep code in here twice. Unfortunately, it's twice because these 2 fields, RR1 and RR2, they map to different places behind the scenes in National Financial System. So they're working on consolidating that to just 1 field, and then they'll do the mapping behind the scenes. But right now, it's 2 separate fields. So you just enter the same rep code twice. And then the next box is your agency number, or sometimes it's referred to as a branch number. I believe for most of you, your rep code is also your agency or branch number. So there is no just 3 character requirement here. So this will be your full, whatever you're used to using as your agency or branch number. The next question asks if this is a managed account, which would be no. And then this last question is asking if you want this to be a mutual fund only IRA, which I would recommend 100% of the time. There is no disadvantage to making this a mutual fund only IRA. If in the future you can purchase stocks or something else and you do in one of these accounts, it just flips it over to a regular non-mutual fund IRA. So there is no harm in ever selecting mutual fund only. So we encourage it 100% of the time because that's what's going to get you the $10 annual maintenance fee instead of a $35 maintenance fee. And then he hit continue. So now we start filling in our client information. And as we'll show when we get to the end of this process, we'll show kind of the paperwork so you can start to see what AIC's or National Financial's paperwork looks like. For brokerage accounts, we use National Financial's forms because they require that. But this flow follows along exactly the flow of their new account form. And our AIC new account form for non-brokerage accounts, so for variable annuities or mutual funds, is the exact same flow. We mirrored it off of that, so you only have one form you really have to get to know, whether it's direct or whether it's brokerage. But it's just asking for the client information. Any field that has a red asterisk after it means it's required. And so at the end of the process, when you hit submit, if you are missing any information in any of those required fields, it will let you know, and it won't let you submit it until you fill that in. So that's how it helps to prevent you from submitting paperwork that's not completely filled out all the way. So it asks for name, social security number, date of birth, telephone. It says day phone and evening phone. You can use, home and cell and work, whatever works in your environment. It does not have to be day and evening. That's just what they've labeled these 2 fields. And we had to require one because we have to have at least a phone number on file for a client. But if you want to use that as home and cell, whatever makes sense to you, you can use that. It asks for marital status and dependents. One difference with the marital status is National Financial and AIC, we only use two, single or married. So people generally fall into one of those buckets. So that is one difference that I've noticed from your new account form. It asks for the driver's license or state ID or passport. There are other options in there depending on if a client has, a non-driving state ID or a passport or something like that. Expiration date and the state, and then the country of citizenship and tax residence. Country of citizenship and tax residence here. Most of the time that's United States, but sometimes you'll have a client who is a citizen of another country that lives here, and so there's a drop-down box to put in the correct information. I will say, and I think you're probably already used to this with Capital Choice, AIC is not licensed to do business in foreign countries. So if you have a client that moves permanently to England or France or Australia or Canada, they permanently have moved out of the US, we can no longer do business with them when that happens, which I believe is the same as what Capital Choice already has. There's a lot of different requirements to be licensed internationally. AIC does not do that because there's a lot of risk with that as well. So if a client is temporarily overseas or overseas for work for 6 months and they still have a US residence and a US bank account, then we just change their mailing address to overseas and their legal address stays in the US. And that's fine. But if they are permanently moving, or even if it's temporary, just for 3 years, but they no longer have a US residence, then they are considered a foreign client and we can no longer do business with them. And that does include Canada and Mexico. So down at the bottom, we've got the address field, and it's just asking for legal address and mailing address, but there's a box you can check if they're the same, so that you just type it in once and then it ports it over to both places. Or if that's different, if they have a P.O. box, we do have to have a legal address on file as well. And then over on the right, he's been clicking next, but over on the right you can see the path that we're going through. Now it looks like a lot of screens, but there's a couple on here that you'll see when we get to that have like one question, and if it doesn't apply you just skip by it. So it's actually not that many screens you have to go through. But once you get through the basic client name, name, social security number, and date of birth, you can flip around, skip to any screen you want to. You don't have to keep hitting next. You can hit any of the hyperlinks on the right to go through any of the screens. If you've just got partial information and you're just filling some of it out now and coming back and doing the rest later. So this is the employment screen. And for employment, we have 3 choices: employed, retired, or not employed. If they are employed, it asks for the occupation and the employer name. The employer address is not required. If you have it, you can put it in there, but it's not required. If they are retired, then it pre-fills retired as the occupation, and it asks for an income source. And this is just a general overview of savings, Social Security, pension, something general. It doesn't have to be, 50% pension, 25% Social Security. You don't have to get that detailed. Just general overview of what income are they receiving. And the same for not employed. If they're not employed, it pre-fills the occupation as not employed, and again, just asks for an income source. The next screen is affiliations, which you're probably already used to these questions because they're standard in the industry. It's asking if the client's a senior foreign political figure, which is no, and if it's yes, then we probably can't take the account. The next question is asking if the client's a control person of a publicly traded company, which happens sometimes, and if it does, you just hit yes. It doesn't mean we can't take the account, it just has to be disclosed. So if they are, you mark yes and indicate if they're a director, 10% shareholder, or policymaking officer, and then what company they work for. And then the last question here is asking if the client is affiliated with FINRA or the MSRB. So this would be if you're opening an account on yourself, you're registered with FINRA, you're affiliated with Capital Choice and AIC, so this would be a yes. And you just put AIC as the entity name and the address, and all it does is code that you're eligible for NAV trading because you are registered with FINRA. This also applies to clients occasionally. Sometimes you'll have a client that works at a fund family or works at Charles Schwab or TD Ameritrade in their back office or something like that. And so in that case, it would apply to them as well. The next screen is suitability, and this follows the new account form exactly. And you'll see in here it's all drop-down boxes, and you can see the various choices. Some of our choices are a little different than what you're used to on your new account paperwork, and we will be having a webinar to go over that more specifically, and you'll be able to see in paper what the choices are instead of having to just rely on the drop-down boxes here. We will give you a paper copy of what this is so you can get used to it. So if you can go back, Dave, to funding source where you put other. So you'll see this is one of the examples. We have just slightly different wording on the choices here. Asset appreciation, business revenue, inheritance, settlement, other, sale of assets, saving from earnings. I think anytime you pick other, it opens up a line here where you type in what other means as he's typed in income. Tax bracket's another place where it's a little bit different. National Financial only uses 3 options: 15% or below, 25 to 27.5, or over 27.5. Yes, we know sometimes people say, I'm 22% tax bracket, that's not in here. Well, in National Financial's eyes, these are the 3 brackets, and people fall into one of the 3, so pick the one that most closely resembles that. Annual expenses is pretty normal probably for what you're used to, and the special expenses and the special expenses time frame. Can you go back and leave that last one blank, Dave, so we can see what happens when you miss something? Thank you. Next is investment objectives. We have 7: preservation of capital, income, growth in income, capital appreciation, speculation, trading profits, and other. So you just rank the investment objectives. You don't have to rank all 7. You just have to at least pick one that's number 1. And if you want to rank all 7, you can, or just rank as many as apply. And again, with other, if you pick other, it will ask you to type in what other is. Risk tolerance, a little bit different. We've got conservative, moderately conservative, moderate, moderately aggressive, aggressive, and combination. So I know there's a couple extra choices from what you're used to in there. Time horizon, near term, very short, short, intermediate, long, or combination. And investment purpose. We've got saving for education, retirement, short-term goals, generating income, accumulating wealth, preserving wealth, market speculation, or other. And then general knowledge. This is just the general investment knowledge the client has. If it's good, limited, extensive, there isn't an option for none there. So if someone truly has no idea what an investment is, just put limited. This next grid, this is the specific product knowledge. And yes, you do have to indicate for each product their level of experience and the number of transactions per year. We have gotten questions before on, well, can't you just default it all to none and I'll change the ones that apply? Our compliance department said no, because you run the risk. It's too easy when something's already pre-filled for you that you just skip on by it and don't even look at it. So they wanted people to actually think about or have a discussion with the client so you really understand your client and if they've had any exposure to any of these products. The next 3 questions are the decision-making questions: if the client consults with their broker, if they make their own decisions, or if they consult with their friends and family. And so it's just yes or no for each of those. And then at the bottom, we've got the held away assets question. So this is asking what assets this client holds away from you and Capital Choice and AIC. You know, do they have mutual funds with another broker somewhere? Do they have an annuity? Do they have futures in some account somewhere? So if the client has assets held away, then you add the dollar amount up here. If they don't, you just put 0. And then if there is a dollar amount here, you just have to make these add up to 100. You can see you don't have to put zeros in all the rest of the boxes. You just have to make something add up to 100, and it helps count for you and tells you when you're at 100. This last box down here, suitability notes, that is an optional box, but it is 64 characters worth of information on if you've got specific suitability information that you want to put in there. So this is where Dave can't spell either, so that's good. Can't count and he can't spell. So if you have specific information that you want captured on this account form, because what you type in here will print out on the new account form. But people have used it for, per client, this account is savings for a mortgage. Or this account, per client, risk tolerance is, very risky or something like that. If there's a specific suitability scenario that you want captured in writing on the form that the client will sign, so thinking about protection later when that client starts, they said they're saving for a house, but then every month they're taking money out. And you don't want 5 years from now for them to come back and say that, well, you let them take this money out, they shouldn't have, This is kind of extra protection. If there is a specific suitability scenario for this account that you want captured in writing, that will be signed by the client, that will be in your files, then you can type information in there. If not, you don't have to put anything in there. Just be aware, if you do put something in there, it does print on the application. And we did have people when we first rolled this system out, and when Know Your Customer came around a few years ago and FINRA started asking all the extra questions, we had people type nasty notes to us in there thinking it would just show up for us in the back office. They would say, I hate your system, I hate this form. It's like, that's great, that's on the client form now, thanks. So just keep in mind, if you're going to be snarky, you have to do it in the right manner, and this is not the right manner. So the next screen is characteristics. So for a brokerage account, this is where you're picking things like, what money market do you want in the account? Brokerage accounts come with a money market. So when the client deposits funds, it goes into that money market until you invest it. And it can earn interest in that money market until it's invested. If clients have check writing on the account, it's tied to that money market. So you're picking the money market, and you're picking the dividends and interest option for the account. So you're picking, this is the overall account level. Do you want the mutual fund dividends to reinvest or pay in cash? You can change that for the specific positions in the account. You're just setting up the default on the account. So if you decide the account's going to default to reinvesting all dividends and interest, each time you make a trade, you can use that default and not have to retype it on the trade ticket. Or you can change per position. You can change each position 2 years from now. You have that flexibility. You're just setting the default for what will happen when things transfer in or are purchased if you want to use that default. I did skip a couple things at the top. This first question is just asking if this specific account holder is an employee of AIC. So that would only apply to yourself. And I know that sounds similar to the question we asked before, but the question before was just asking if someone is affiliated with FINRA, meaning they're registered. This is specifically asking if they are an employee of the broker-dealer, which would only apply to yourself. And then that tax certification question, for an IRA, it defaults to exempt. That's the only option. That does not mean they're exempt from taxes. That is just the terminology on a brokerage account for an IRA because it's exempt from other certain tax things that they do. If this was an individual account, you would see other options in there on, are they U.S. citizen, W-9 certified, are they W-8 certified, various things that apply in non-retirement situations. So Dave's going to pick a money market, and you do have several options there to choose from, including one that is FDIC insured. And so it invests in various banks that are FDIC insured. Okay, at the bottom here are a few optional features which won't apply very often. The first one he's looking at, it says fee-based account. This is the one thing I don't like about UAO is this is also the field where you pick if a client wants check writing, which has nothing to do with a fee-based account. The reason it's like that is in National Financial System, both those codes reside in the same field. If you are doing a managed account or you're doing check writing or you're doing both, it's all in the same field. So their box says fee-based account, but this box really is if you are doing check writing on the account, this is where you would choose that. So not going into too much detail, but there are 2 levels of check writing on brokerage accounts. Primarily non-qualified, but if a client is old enough in their IRA to take distributions, they can have check writing for those distributions and write the checks themselves. So there's 2 levels. There's brokerage access and brokerage portfolio. More detail will be given at a future time, but basically brokerage access is check writing. Brokerage portfolio includes debit card. So if you've got higher net worth client, they've got a large individual or trust account, they can actually tie a debit card to this and take money out. We've seen people, they use it, you know, pay for gas, pay for groceries, pay for whatever. They kind of use it like another checking account that they have, and you just keep enough cash in the money market, and then what they're not using in cash, you invest. So just some different options there. At the bottom, the other option we'll talk about is e-delivery. So if you entered the client email address earlier on, and you check this box, it's not automatically signing them up for e-delivery of their statements, but because the client still has to consent to that. But what will happen is after you set up the account, the client will get an email from National Financial saying, hey, we heard you're interested in signing up for e-delivery. If you are, click here. They click there. It gives them the disclaimer of, you know, you're consenting to getting your statements and tax documents electronically. It lets them pick which ones they want. So they could say, I want paper tax documents, but I want electronic statements and confirms or things like that. So it lets them choose their options, and then that ties back to their online access so that if they choose e-delivery, it will send them an email when their statements are ready each month, and then they just go online and view them, or they can click at the link in the email to go view them. So this is just helping if you know you have a client that likes to use e-delivery, or if you just want to encourage your clients to use e-delivery, they don't have to sign up. This just pushes an email out to them that gives them a very easy option to sign up for that. And then it's up to them if they want to use it or not. All right, the next screen is contributions. Because I'm doing an IRA, we have a screen asking what kind of contribution this is. Right now, this screen is optional because all it does is actually just fill out a box on National Financial's IRA app that they really don't care if it's filled out or not. So right now it defaults to none, just meaning you're not specifying. So you could just be setting up an account, doing a contribution later, or you're just not specifying right now what it is. We may, as part of Department of Labor, require this screen in the future. And then if you choose rollover, maybe it asks you a couple other questions or something like that. We're looking at some options for that. But for right now, if you would like to fill out the screen, you can. But you don't have to. You can just leave it as none. Depends on how detailed you want to get on that. And then this is the first screen that really you can just skip on by if it doesn't apply. This screen is called duplicate info, and it's primarily asking if you want to send copies of the client's statements and confirms to a third party, like their CPA or someone else. Sometimes clients want that going directly to them, and if they do, you just change that box to yes. The second question there you change to yes, and it opens this field so you can say, no, they just want statements. They don't need trade confirms, who it's going to, and the address. You can add multiple people. If you click remove, it just takes it back off. So, and if you don't need this screen, you just skip by it. There's another question on there that does not apply to us at all. It just defaults to no. So truly that screen is just to indicate that they want copies of statements and confirms to go to a third party. And if they don't, you skip on by. Because I'm doing an IRA, our next screen is beneficiaries. If I was doing a joint account or something like that, it would not show up on that. Beneficiaries is asking if you wish to add beneficiaries to the IRA. You can say no, because National Financial has default rules that if you do not select beneficiaries, when the client passes away, if they're married, it goes to their spouse, and if they're not, it goes to their estate. If you're fine with that and the client's fine with that, you don't have to select beneficiaries. However, as a best practice, we recommend, selecting beneficiaries on an account because you don't know if that client's going to pass away tomorrow or 80 years from now, and what the scenario may be, and maybe they don't want it to go to their spouse 80 years from now. So it's, as a best practice, as you know, you should set up beneficiaries. So your options here, it makes you start with a primary, and your options are spouse, non-spouse, trust, entity, or estate. So you just pick the option, type in the name, the percentage. It shows social security number and date of birth as both being required. Honestly, only the date of birth is required. They like to have the social, but even though that red asterisk is there, it will go through if there's no social, but it has to have a date of birth for RMD calculation purposes. Once you get past one, you just click more, and you can keep adding more primaries. You can add contingent. You can add as many beneficiaries as you've got there. So just click remove so we can get past that. The next screen is notes, and this is another optional screen. This is just kind of an internal notepad for yourself. It shows an audit trail of who else, how many times you've been in this account. It will show your name. It shows whatever name is on your Wealthscape ID. We're using our training ID right now. And it shows you all the times that you've been in. It is in Mountain Time because the group that programs this tool is in Denver, so they're in Mountain Time. And what you can do here is at the bottom, if you want to send a note to yourself for later on, like still need to get driver's license number, get beneficiary info, next time talk to client, you can type in a note to yourself and save it, and then it'll show up here in previous notes. And then the next time you log in and pull up this account to work on it, you could go to notes and see what note you left for yourself. If you think that's helpful, you can use it. If you don't, you do not have to use this at all. Again, it does not send notes to us in the back office, so don't use it to tell us anything. It's truly just like an internal audit trail notepad. If you like it, use it. If you don't, skip on by it. So now we come to verify and submit. So you can see the screens that we actually really had to fill out. There weren't all that many of them because we skipped a few of those and some of those were optional. Verify and submit shows you a readback screen. So it shows you everything that you typed in. And then at the bottom, it gives you an option to print this screen if you want to. You don't have to. We've seen people do that where you type in what you have and then you print this page off and highlight what you still need to get at the next client meeting, just as a reminder and a way to write it down there. So I've seen people do that. If you find printing this helps you in some way, please do it, but certainly don't have to. And then over on the right, we've got the button that says Submit Account Setup. So when we click that, the first thing it's going to do is check, go ahead and click it, please. The first thing it's going to do is check and see if you completed all the required fields. In this case, we missed one. So it's showing you we missed special expenses, and it gives you the link to click. And if you click that link, it takes you back to that screen, and it highlights in red what you're missing. So it stands out a little bit more. So then you can just go ahead and fill that in and go back to verify and submit. Or if you had multiple ones, you can go back to that error summary page and just keep going through and getting your required field. So we've completed that, so we're going to do Submit Account Setup. And then sometimes you'll see the screen, sometimes not. This is an address standardization screen. So if you typed in the client address and it feels there's a better format for that to be in to comply with the Postal Service standards, it'll suggest that to you. If you typed it in as perfectly and it can't think of anything else, you won't even see this screen. In this case, he just typed it, he didn't put road, so it's suggesting road, and it's suggesting the last 4 digits of the zip code. You can go with what it suggests, or if you want to, you can go with what you originally typed in. It's just there as a suggestion. Once you get past that, it's giving you 3 options. You can close and finish this later. You can do a paper-based signature, and if you click that, then what it's going to do is give you your account number right then. It's going to have transmitted the account information to us, so the account is live on the system. And then we can go to the Documents tab, which I'll show you in a minute, and print out all the documents for a wet signature. Or you can click on e-signature. And when you click on e-signature, there's one screen just to set up which documents are going through and where it's going. So at the top, you'll see if you already typed in the client email address, it'll be there. Otherwise, you can type it in. And then here it gives you the access code. So how this works, as I mentioned before, it goes through DocuSign, and the client gets an email. So if they're sitting with you, everybody has their phone with them. They can access their email on their phone. You can just give them the access code while they're sitting with you. They can pull up the paperwork on their phone. They can finger sign it there and be done. Or if they're not sitting with you, then you just give them that access code either over the phone or by email so that they have it for when they get their email from DocuSign. It'll ask them for that access code in order to give them access to the paperwork to look at. Down here, it's got your information as the rep. You will have to set that up just the very first time you use e-signature, and then it'll be out there forever. And then it shows us the documents that can go through e-signature. Only one of these is actually the form. The rest of this is all disclosure booklets because you've got AIC's disclosure with our privacy policy and all the stuff we're required to send. And then because it's an IRA, there's a custodial agreement for National Financial, and there's some other documents just telling that National is required to send about IRAs. But the nice thing is, instead of printing all that off and having to give it to the client because you know they're not going to read it anyway, you can send it through e-signature for them to not read it in e-signature. But at least it has been delivered. If it goes through the e-signature envelope, it can considered as having been delivered to the client. They can print it off, they can save it electronically so they don't have to print it once they get it in DocuSign. But it will all go in their e-signature packet. And then the actual IRA application, which we'll look at in a minute, that is there. Now we also have some optional documents down here, and these are AIC forms that you might need depending on the situation, which can go through e-signature. One is the rollover form. So if you do an IRA rollover, there is a one-page form the client has to sign just acknowledging the considerations of rolling over an IRA, or should you have left it in the 401k from that rule that came out about a couple years ago. And then the bottom form is our version of what we call the switch form, which you're probably used to. So if you're liquidating one investment to purchase another, a lot of people call it a switch form. Its fancy title is Acknowledgement of Investment Product Change Form. And I apologize because this form just went from 1 page to 3 pages for DOL. So it does ask a lot of questions, but it captures a lot of suitability information. So if you fill this form out, you're not going to have to go back and forth with supervision a lot, giving additional information or asking more questions. You'll see every form from UAO has a barcode on it. And what that means is when you submit something through UAO, it automatically puts a placeholder out in our imaging system that basically says, hey, you've submitted an account, we're expecting paperwork. When you send in, whether it's through e-signature or it's electronic through SMS, when you send us paperwork, that barcode matches your paperwork up with that placeholder and says, oh, we got the paperwork, now it's time to send it for processing and supervision. So it matches it up and automatically flips it over to start being reviewed and any processing that we have to do in the back office. So that's why everything in UAO has a barcode on it. But we also have an option, there's a cover sheet in here that has the barcode on it. So if you got your forms from someplace else, like even though you did this, you pulled the forms off of Producer Workbench, or you pulled the forms out of Laser app without going through UAO first, or you did the process just slightly differently, there's a cover sheet that has that barcode on it. So as long as you slap the cover sheet on top of it, your other forms don't have to have the barcode, and it all matches up anyway. At the very bottom, there are some forms that cannot go through e-signature. Primarily, it's a transfer of assets form. Those other forms in there are old that we don't use much anymore. But primarily, it's that transfer of assets form because it is, unfortunately, it is not industry standard yet for transfer paperwork to be accepted through e-signature. Some firms will take it and some firms won't. I've talked with a couple firms that turned e-signature on for this and got so many forms rejected from other firms that they turned it back off because it just wasn't working. So, and then what the form that Dave has pulled up right now, that's our internal transfer form. So this is internally brokerage to brokerage. So once you have a client with brokerage account at AIC, let's say they've got an individual account and a joint account and they want to move money, they want to move the individual completely over to the joint. This is just kind of an internal version of that transfer form. So the transfer stuff is not eligible for e-signature yet. We're still hoping, as more firms in the industry accept that we can turn that switch on, but right now they're not. So that just means that form you'd still need to get a real signature from the client. But once you pick what forms you want to go in this packet, right now it has selected automatically the IRA application and the disclosures. But if you needed the switch form, you could add that in there too. Once you've selected that, then, oh, he just sent it to me, so I have an email waiting for me to sign. You hit submit, and it will send it to the client. And it says your transaction's been submitted to the client for signature. And so now you can see that this status here is it's queued to go out. And now you have some statuses. So you can check the progress. If you haven't seen the paperwork come to you after a couple of days, you can come out here, pull this up in the search feature, select this, come out to this e-signature status page, and you can see, well, it was sent to the client, but they haven't signed it yet. And you can maybe give them a reminder to sign it. The system will periodically send them reminders. I believe it's every 5 days. It gives them 30 days to sign it. If they haven't signed it in 30 days, then it will drop off and you'll have to resend it. But it does give them 30 days to sign it, and it does send them reminders, especially right before the end of that 30 days. It sends them, hey, this is going to expire if you don't sign it. But you can come out here and see the status of that. So while we're here, I do want to show you documents. So if you're not using e-signature, you would click on the documents link, and that's where you're actually going to print out the form. So it's going to be pre-filled from UAO, the new account form is, because you typed in all the information, but this is where you would print it instead. So it starts here with the IRA application and those disclosures, and then those optional forms that we saw below in case you need those. So go ahead and click on the IRA application, and we'll just take a look. I mean, we've gone through the process so you know what the fields are, but we want you to see what the form actually looks like, since it's a little bit different than what you're used to. National Financial calls their IRAs Premier Select IRA, so you'll see that wording at the top of the form. And up here, it's got your information pre-filled. And this is Premier Select IRA application, and the flow, it just flows with all the, the order of the screens that we went through. We've got our client information, we've got our employment. Section 3 didn't apply to us for this particular account because that's an IRA beneficiary account, so they call it IRA BDA. It's also inherited IRA. They just call it an IRA BDA. So if we had that account type, it would have asked us questions to fill out Section 3. And Section 4 didn't apply to us because this account isn't for a minor, doesn't have a custodian on it. There's our suitability information and how it filled that out. There's our account characteristics, including our money market. And our beneficiary information, we didn't select any, so there's nothing in there. Then something for them to read through, and then this is the signature section. So the client signs and dates up here. It has to be dated. It will get rejected if it's not dated. And it will get rejected if it's not dated within 60 days of when we get it too. That has been something that FINRA's been cracking down on, is stale dated paperwork. It's dated now and we get it 6 months from now. So because a lot can change in that 6 months from when you first met with the client to when anything's submitted. So you've got 60 days in order from when this is signed from when we get it. Otherwise it will be stale dated, and it doesn't mean it has to be completely redone. It means that it has to go back for the client so they can initial and redate and make sure that that information is still accurate. Down here at the bottom, the first line is where you sign and date, and then the second line is where the home office signs off accepting the account. So in e-signature, it will, the client's signature will show up there and yours will show up down there. So that is what National Financial's IRA application looks like, and that is UAO for a brokerage account. Very quickly, we're going to show you mutual fund and annuity. You'll see the flow is the same. The majority of the questions are exactly the same. There's just a couple minor changes for those. So Dave, if you'll pick up that second one, if you'll hit select. This is a mutual fund that we started the other day. And you'll see, looks pretty much exactly the same as what we did before. One difference is you actually pick your product sponsor. So we picked American Funds for this one. And that ties in with Laser App. So at the end, it'll send you out to get American Funds paperwork off of Laser App. And it's not asking you for a branch prefix, since that only applies for brokerage accounts. But it asks for your rep code and agency. The primary holder, employment, all of that's exactly the same. So is suitability. You will see a different screen there that says account stakeholders. If I could take that off, I would. We do not use this screen. But unfortunately, National Financial has 200 firms that clear through them. And some of these things are the base framework of their system. And this screen is part of the base framework of their system. And even though we personally don't use it, at this time, we can't get it removed, because then they'd have to remove it for all 200 people, and some people do use it. So We won't really cover this screen because we don't use it. It does not apply to anything, and it's one thing that you can just skip on by. But suitability is the same. Characteristics doesn't have anything in it really other than that tax question, because you're not setting up a money market because this isn't a brokerage account. You're not picking your dividends and interest because you're going to do that on the American Funds app instead. But it does have this initial transaction screen. So this is really here more for future development. Right now, we recommend, this is just a snapshot of what you're doing. The option here is buy or transfer. Then you just type in what mutual fund. If you want to type out all the funds you're buying, you can, but you don't have to. And then you just do an overall dollar amount of the transaction. And if you click add, that adds it to this batch down here, and then that gets you by the screen. What they're working on with this screen is actually having this be a drop-down box. So based off of picking American funds at the beginning of the process, it will eventually show all the American funds available and let you actually select the funds you're buying on here and have that map onto the American funds paperwork. So that's in development, but right now it doesn't do that. So you just have to put, basically, you're buying or transferring. You can put American funds. Sometimes I just type mutual funds, and then the dollar amount. The same thing for annuity. The screen is there for annuity, and you just basically click buy, annuity, and the dollar amount. Click add. It just gives us an overall idea of what the purchase amount is and what you're doing, and that gets you by this screen. Otherwise, everything else is the same, except that mutual funds and annuities aren't hooked up to e-signature, so you can't use that. If you click the documents link, that is where you'll see our AIC form, because this is mutual fund direct, so it's not through National Financial. We're back to doing direct business at American Funds at this. So we have, AIC has a new account form for that, just like your Capital Choice new account form that you're used to using for now. But you'll see, although it has our logo on it, everything else is the same pretty much. All the questions, because we asked the same questions for suitability, and we modeled this off of National Financial's account form. So other than the font and the logo being a little bit different, all the information's the same. Except up here we've got, are you doing a mutual fund, an annuity, or third-party advisory? It's got all the registration types there. And then the action, if this is a new account, change a broker-dealer, because direct mutual funds can do a change a broker-dealer instead of a transfer of assets. Or if you're doing a financial update, which you're supposed to be doing every 3 years. Otherwise, it's pre-filled all the client information and same choices. And if the last page, you'll see same kind of signature thing. This has spots for multiple signatures. What we were doing before was an IRA, so that's only one signer. If I was doing a joint account at National Financial, they have a non-qualified brokerage application that has spots for multiple signers, just like this. But your clients sign here, you sign here, and then home office signs off down there.